The final movement we'll be discussing is Surrealism. And this is another one of my favorites. And the reason why is because it delves into the spaces of the unconscious mind, the dream world, just sort of the oddities of expression and consciousness. And so here you see a quote from Salvador Dali, who many consider to be sort of the preeminent surrealist, where he says the only difference between a mad man and myself is that I'm not mad. So Dali was very well known for trying to inhabit the consciousness of madness. But this idea that he was mad, again, he was a very rational person, but he wanted to see the other side of consciousness, might we say. So one of the people who has a huge influence on surrealism is Sigmund Freud. If you don't know much about Freud, he is the father of psychoanalysis. So, in a sense, modern day psychoanalytical therapy. If you talk to someone in psychology today, they probably would say that they don't follow most of Freud's thinking. But he was the father of the practice of thinking about, like, how do you talk to people about their psychology, right? Their inner lives, their consciousness, right? Their thoughts, their fears, as a way to understand who they are. Freud was also very interested in artists. You'll see his quote here: "Artists, the people, society needs to express what most of us must learn to inhibit." Freud believed that a lot of us hide what makes us us, and sometimes that can turn into toxicity. But also other times, people like artists can use it to create expression. And just a little note on Freud: some of the things that he was interested in, things like fetishes and obsessions, sublimation of desire, the id, the ego, and superego, and dream theory. Again, we can't go too far into this for the purposes of this course, but you'll notice these themes when you look at surrealist works. You'll notice things like fetishization. Most people, by the way, if they have a fetish, they tend to hide it. So again, Freud talks a lot about how our psychology, we tend to hide things, or as he put it, sublimate them, push them down. Our obsessions, we tend to not make these things very public. And he felt that this was very unhealthy behavior, but extremely human behavior. You'll see subjects revolving around fetishization, obsession, sublimation. He also was very interested in the components of our psyche, as he put it, the id, the ego, and then the idea of an overarching superego. The id, many people characterize it as like the child inside that we learn to control, because we all have these base urges. We have to defecate, we have to procreate, right? These are things that can be very carnal and very animalistic, but we learn to civilize those tendencies, let us say. And the way we do that is by having our ego manage the appropriateness of our behavior. Each culture is said to have a superego. This is why if you meet someone from a different culture, they may not have the same thoughts on certain issues as you would. Let's think morality, for instance. If you speak to someone from like a European culture about morality, they may have a much more freer or looser feeling on that. That's what I've experienced anyway. If you speak to someone perhaps from an Asian culture, they might have a more extreme idea of morality, might again feel that you should have more rules about morality. Again, I'm just making sort of blanket statements here, but my point is that everyone's superego manages the culture differently. And the rules may be different from each culture to each culture. The final thing on the list is dream theory. This comes up a lot in surrealist works, where you see the function, right, of this idea of dreams, the unconscious mind being what guides and creates, right, the artwork. So what are some pieces we can look at? We can look at like Salvador Dali here, his work, The Persistence of Memory. This one is very famous for being like a dreamscape, where everything's happening in this like it would in a dream, right? So you have the melting clocks. In dreams, time isn't usually what it seems. Our perception or our connection to it is off, right? You see these odd things like bugs crawling on a clock, things that might scare us, right? That are our fears. And we're kind of in this nowhere place, right? So he creates this dreamscape in a sense that's, again, about what happens at the night, right, when we sleep. So again, you see this piece, le sommeil, or the sleep, where you have this like deflated face. propped up with these crutches. I always wonder if the crutches are symbols of like the things that we use as crutches. Again, they're interested in psychology, right? So the fact that most of us have a crutch or two that we lean on in a sense to get us through. They might be good crutches, they might be bad crutches, right? But again, you'll notice these kind of dreamscape kind of places. Something like fetishes, we can see in Maria Oppenheim's work. This is her famous work, Le Déjeuner en Forêt, or The Luncheon in Fur, where she takes a teacup and a saucer and a spoon and covers it with fur. To me, this piece can be viewed as very animalistic or primal, but it also can be like, how do you take something civilized and make it animalistic? And what are the things that we fetishize? What are things that are ritualistic to us? Tea service, if you've never done it, is when you do it, the proper tea is very ritualistic. There are certain ways to do it. Some even have dress codes. So, again, it's this idea of ritualization of perhaps behavior and how, rules make people behave in society. Again, it's managing the id, right? This is Magritte, one of my favorites, The Treachery of Images. Magritte plays around a lot with images and words and the sense of the disconnect between them. And this is a study we call semiotics. It's a very deep study, so I don't suggest it for the faint-hearted. But semiotic theory deals with like, how do we name and create meaning behind the objects that we use? Like, why is a pipe a pipe? Why is a cat, right? How did we all decide that? And here in the image, if you speak French, you'll know that the text says "Ceci n'est pas un pipe," which means this is not a pipe. So you're looking at it and you're like, but it is. And he's telling you it's not. The one theory, you could think about is that we've agreed that this is a pipe through the English language, or even in the sense the French language, right? And then if you're really astute, you might say, well, that's actually not a pipe. It's a painting of a pipe. So you'll notice that there's these layers of meaning about words and images and understanding. And he goes there with his surrealism. These are some other works of his. Where again, he's playing with the convention of what's true, what's real, what's false, what do we see. I always love clairvoyance because clairvoyance is to see the future. So the guy's, painting and he's looking at the egg, but he's painting a bird. It's quite clever in my mind. And then just some final works here as well. So you'll notice that Magritte kind of plays with this sense of like what's happening, what's going on. And there's a sort of oddity to his works that I always quite love.